New financial models for independent music, which is something that, of course, is on everybody's mind. If you work in the independent music industry, how the hell do you get the money in? And we've got 4 fantastic people on the stage who are going to talk you through, give you some key tips on how to do exactly that. So welcome to the stage. My name's Ruth, by the way. Hello. I'm a radio presenter and general sort of big mouth, as you can probably tell. So luckily, we've got these guys to talk about the cash. We've got Cliff on the end, who is a digital media and entertainment lawyer. So I'm very interested to hear what you've got to say, Cliff.
Thank you very much.
No pressure. Then we've got Gavin here, who is from Inner City Music and Band on the Wall, who, if you aren't aware of, then immediately get online now and have a little search and have a look. Fantastic. Also, lots to come from Gavin, hopefully.
Yep.
Yes, good. And then we have got Nicholas, who is the founder of Games Brief, Money from Games. We shall see where that goes. That's going to be interesting. And then we have Rob on the end, who is agent and partner at Coda Agency, which is basically a massive agency. I'm pretty sure you are all aware of Coda. The 3 names I wrote down were John Grant, Bon Iver, and Billy Bragg. But I mean, the list literally goes on into the hundreds of the people that Rob looks after. So, I mean, really, we've got an incredible array of people. We've got the lawyer, we've got the promoter, we've got the games guru, and we've got the agent. And I think for this topic, it's great to hear from, I think they're all going to be coming from quite different perspectives. What I do want to say at this point as well is that it'd be great to hear from you, because you're all experts as well in your own right in whatever industry you work in, whatever part of the industry you work in. So if there's something you'd like to join in with, please do stick your hand. I think there's a microphone, is there, that we're meant to wait for? Is that right? Yes, there is. Excellent. So if you do want to join in, please stick your hand up and ask questions from the word go. We're not going to do a Q&A at the end, just join in. So I think I'm going to start with you, Gavin. Yes, you. Because if you've read his biography in the little spiel, which is all very exciting and helpful, there's a lot going on with what you do with Band on the Wall in terms of exactly this question, which is going forward, how the hell do we cut the cake differently? How do people make money, from artists to venues, promoters? What are you guys actively doing to change things?
Okay, so from our perspective, when I took over at Band on the Wall about 6 years ago, before the building had been reopened, redeveloped, we looked at the business model, and it was quite obvious, this is after I'd accepted the job, but anyway, we looked at the model, and it was obvious that actually the scale of the venue was not sufficient to support itself, and that we were going to have to look very creatively at how we were going to generate additional incomes as a venue. Now, I'll come back to scale in a minute, because scale is, in fact, incredibly important. And it's all about the point at which you hit the brake, and once in this business you've hit the brake, you can actually start to make surpluses or profit or money, depends on how you look at it. So what was quite apparent to us was that within a 340 capacity standing venue, seated 150 seats, that it was going to be difficult. There are kind of 2 models within venues of our scale. One, which is by far the most common, is that a small group of enthusiasts work themselves to the bone day and night and keep the thing rolling. And they do that really by being, it's a very horizontal structure. The guy that books the bands is the guy that orders the rider, is the guy that books the flights, is the guy that books the hotel, is the guy that gets the posters done, is the guy that is there on the night, and very often the guy stood behind the sound desk. It's a very horizontal structure, and I've done it, and it's incredibly difficult to sustain, especially, you know, as you grow older and you kind of want to have a life. So therefore, as a venue, I felt straight away that what we needed was something that was far more hierarchical. And musicians tend not to like that. But the reality is that with hierarchy comes efficiency. And so what we have is a system whereby everyone has a very specific job, and that job is very specifically outlined within the procedures of the venue. Sorry, I'm just talking about a venue at the moment. We'll talk about artists in a minute and how it impacts on artists. So what that means is that my programmer, his responsibility is absolutely specific. he has 10 pieces of data which he must enter into the database and a costing, which is also done in the database. And that's his job done. As soon as that job is done, he then sends out a single email. We do not use email to disseminate information. It's just a mechanism to abdicate responsibility. It is not a mechanism to deliver events effectively. So we send out one email, and that email is basically saying, this event is now ready to go on sale. Everything is in place. I've done my job. And then that passes very specifically to the next 3 people. And those next 3 people is the marketing manager to collect the marketing information, the production manager to collect the production information, and the administrator to do the general administration, so the issuing of the contracts and the booking of the hotels, the collection of the rider, all those things. All those things go back into the database. And then once that is complete, that then gets passed down the chain, and then for the next person, it's all about operations. So it's the operations manager, venue manager, the on-the-night technicians. Now, very efficient system, works really well. Why would we run that kind of system in a 340 cap venue that has no chance of actually sustaining that number of staff? Well, the rationale that we realized was there, and the best option for us, was if you put that system in place and you become ultra efficient, you can actually do any number of events almost anywhere. We actually now produce, one way or another, or are involved in, including all our education programs and everything else, about 1,200 events a year. So we are incredibly efficient. Everyone knows exactly what they have to do to make the thing work, and it works like clockwork, really effectively. And we think through that we maximize the potential audiences that are there and give absolute maximum value of money for money and return ultimately to the artist through running those kind of mechanisms. Also allows us to produce tours. We don't just book a band to come and play in the venue. We almost always investigate the opportunities for touring. Now, some of that touring is supported through the Arts Council, through strategic touring, and some of that is effectively commercial touring, which supports the organisation. In supporting the organisation, it then invests back into the infrastructure and supports the overall delivery of the programme, which in turn gives return ultimately back to the bands. Now, coming back to the point about the break point, or the point where you actually start returning, it's very, very difficult, as I've said, to make any kind of surplus out of a 300 cap venue that really covers all the overheads. So just so that you're aware, and I'll stop in a minute because I'm just going on there, but I'll stop in a minute. Just so you're aware, the overhead of the venue is about £100,000 a year. That's not staff, that's just for the empty building. It's about 100, that's 330 odd pounds a day. That's for heating, lighting, rent rates, insurances, modern building, you need all your fire regs, all your stuff needs checking, your lift needs checking. So it's about £100,000, 330 quid a day. So before you even start thinking about the economy of the show and what that has cost, I do a lecture which is called The Grand Don't Come for Free. We start on, if you sell 100 tickets on a £10 ticket, are you worth £1,000 as a band? And what I do is chip it away, and of course what you're actually worth is about £7.36. And that is not actually taking into account some of the overhead costs. Everyone always talks about the bar, will you get the bar revenue? Well, the bar revenue is quite interesting because, I don't know, maybe it's in this sector. You might go out and think, well, if I go out to a bar, I spend at least a tenner. Do you know what the average spend per head for us, and this is including incredibly busy club nights, is about £9 a head. And that's people coming out drinking heavily. On a seated gig or a standing gig, 100 people in it, that starts at 8, finishes about 10:30, you're lucky if you realise a net of about £4.20 a head. You're pretty lucky. So that's 420 quid if it's 100 people, of which 20% goes on VAT and 30% goes on cost of sales, and then staff. So you're really not looking at, a considerable surplus at all. The challenges are there. The challenges are there for the bands, and the challenges are there for the venues. And I think that to investigate and explore how we can all work better at generating effective income, not only through live events, but also through all the associated activity in the partnership between the bands and the venues, or the producers, the promoters, tour managers, is going to be a very interesting development that should take place, will have to take place over the next couple of years. I think I'll stop there.
The revolution starts here.
Can I start an
Yes,
argument? Can I start
please.
an argument?
Let's start an argument. Let's do it.
I love what you say, and I think that your advice is both awesome and terrible, depending on where people are in their journey.
Yes.
And I think that's a really important thing to get. I get asked at different events to talk about what an investor thinks. There's no such thing as an investor. Every single investor is different. There's no such thing as a band or an artist. They're at different places in their journey. There's an amazing book called The Lean Startup, which is very aimed at VC and finance and stuff, but it says anybody trying to make a product or service, I would count music in that, under conditions of extreme uncertainty is a startup. That means you're all startups. I mean, every one of you is. And it says two things. There's two ways of doing things. When you know what you're doing, hierarchy, optimize, organize. You know what you're doing, you can make it incredibly efficient, and I would absolutely think that's brilliant. While you're figuring out what to do, that hierarchy can be the enemy of finding out what works. And what I'm hearing from you is that you found something that works, and you know what, this works for me, and it might work for other venues, it might work for other people. And if you're in that place, run with it. But if there's an angle that's different, you're not a venue, you're still an artist or whatever. I suppose I'm worried that artists in the room might go away and think I must be more hierarchical. And what Lean Startup says is that I must figure out how to learn faster than I run out of money. I have to get a job. So that was my issue. So I basically totally agree with what you're saying. I love what you're doing. I think you're in a brilliant place. I'm just a teensy bit nervous that everybody goes away and tries to not quite time and motion study what they do. Then some people might be in trouble.
What money does an artist start with when they start creating? They don't. You know, they create because they want to create. They write great songs. They write.
Yes,
albums.
yeah, absolutely.
It's when they have money, they make crap albums. So that's what happens. They get drug, addictions and so on. The key thing for me, my job as an agent, is to take a band from the level of 150 people in one scene, or 200 people, and to grow that band into they can sell 1,000 tickets, they can sell out arenas, or wherever they get to. The key short to medium term thing is to actually get a band to the level that they can sustain touring without having to worry, take money from a record label, the Arts Council, or anybody. They can sustain touring, and their horizons are actually gone as far that they can tour outside this country as well. And that is the game. That what Gavin talked about, how nobody makes money at the level of 200 to 300 people, is right. You know, you look at the economy of live shows and selling tickets at that level. The band on the ticket income is barely covering the cost of that show. Hopefully, the bar is turning over enough to actually sustain that venue existing as it does.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
So, the good news is that there's more people going to live shows. The bad news is that their attention spans are getting shorter and shorter and shorter, so you have to find a way of engaging with them quickly at an early on level and keeping those people, and so keeping that audience for them.
And getting them spending. I mean, I guess there's this idea that people don't want to pay for music, which I think is actually rubbish, and I think it's something that's been talked about a lot in the press, and that is making people feel quite depressed about the state of the music industry. If you're a new band and you're going out there and you're trying to make money, I think people do want to pay. If you get them in the right place, you get them in the right venue, you get that.
Sometimes you have to hook them by giving them something free, though.
Okay.
It's like you're seeing more albums and more bands are being launched, be it in London or Berlin or wherever, with the free show, or the free show with the free download. And that is how they're engaging that audience, to then give them the data on sign-up. Following that, they'll then hit them with the chance of buying tickets to a 500 capacity show or an album and so on. That's what's happening.
But I think that plays into the fact that... Okay, but I think what that feeds into is how that's one of the core tenets of marketing, which used to be seen something that artists were above, as it were. But actually, you're now having to take a marketing-led approach. Probably not for the last time today, I'll mention what you two did with Apple this week, as it were, demonstrate. That's marketing. And the idea that people will pay for music or not pay for music is a dangerous one, because you have to then get into much deeper understanding as to how marketing works. The trousers I'm wearing in the nicest possible way, they may have cost £500, they may have cost £5. The difference between the unit price was what was cost to market them, what the brand was, and what I felt was worth paying for. And that's something that I think content-based businesses are slowly and inexorably getting their head round, whereas if you were to launch a washing powder tomorrow, your entire strategy would be based upon what are we paying for, what are we selling it for, what are people actually buying, is it an emotional purchase, is it something that's extraordinarily useful, are there 500 exactly the same? And I think that what the entire content community, be it artists, be it labels, be it music publishers, are slowly getting their head around the fact that it isn't this wonderful, unique piece of intellectual property that you could control and monetize in the way that you dictated. You've now got to enter a market and have a marketing-led approach. So everything that everyone has said, be it the free show or understanding actually, is it about the beer money, or if you're a telco, what's my ARPU? It's exactly the same issue.
It's the mechanism. How do you get that money off the fans? And it doesn't kind of matter whether it's for a sticker or for a record or for a ticket. Or
right.
It's how do you get that money off the fans?
What kind of hookups are you seeing, Cliff, in your role as a lawyer, that people are, what kind of lengths are people going to get money? What kind of different different ideas have people come up with, artists specifically, that they've had to do to actually bring in some money that may be the cynical marketing move?
Well, I don't, but personally, see, the thing is that, and again, I'm going to be slightly unfair, but that's the typical artist, the idea that there's something cynical about marketing. There's nothing cynical about marketing, it's just a completely different discipline. I think cynical's sitting back, signing to a label and expecting to be fed for 15 years. Yeah, that's cynical. Okay, yeah. It's just what people have been used to. So I'll kill that dragon right now. So it's about understanding different disciplines and what people will do. So I was at a label for many years, and back then, before many of you were born, this was in the early 90s, all of your main money would come from your recorded music income. Live was simply a loss leader in order to demonstrate album. Videos, again, were a massive loss leader in order to do that. And fan clubs and merchandise, you're lucky, would mean that you break even on a tour or might have a nice piece of memorabilia afterwards. You have seen a complete 180 with regard to the pie chart of revenues, and there is a significant proportion of that with regard to live. A platform which answers that point, and actually I think best illustrates what people will pay for. If you haven't been to Pledge Music, or you haven't got your music on Pledge Music, I would check it out pretty quickly. But that is where people are creating fan-based, fan-led experiences. The brands and artists and platforms then can feed back to. And on that, you will see effectively a hierarchy of what people will pay for and what they actually value. And I'm prepared to bet that in 98% of the fan campaigns, the most expensive thing to create, the album, is always the cheapest.
Yeah, agreed.
And the handwritten handkerchief, or there was one who was actually giving their firstborn child for $1 million. No intercourse, just sperm at the world's leading sperm bank, as it were. But the average...
Did he sell it?
So we'll have to wait and see. His campaign was fully funded, let's just say. It was satisfied to that extent. As are 97% of campaigns on Pledge Music. And the average transaction on Pledge is $61.
Kickstarter is a similar place, and I spend more time there because of games. And you see, and I'm going to be talking about this later as well, you see that the 35% of all crowdfunding money comes from the $100 price point. And I've got examples I'm going to show downstairs of where, and this pattern's repeated again and again, 15% of the pledges represent 50% of the money. I don't think crowdfunding replaces labels or traditional routes of making money. What I agree with you totally is that if you are interested in creative ways of funding what you do, here are thousands of creative artists experimenting in plain view, showing you what's working on these places. You should be there to understand them.
It's clear, though, that when you, with pledge funding and any kind of pledge system, it's not like these bands are existing outside the major or independent world. That actually a lot of these albums are then getting licensed at some point too.
That's fine.
To a label. Or you have a promoter coming on board.
That's a really important place.
What you do taking away is that need that actually a band has to sign a label, take a 50 grand check, goes off to record an album for 6 months, thinks it's not their money. It's kind of like their money and their fans' money, which is different.
Yeah, it's a different dynamic then, isn't it?
But also the thing about pledge is that it did definitely start as a fan funding, I support this artist, I pledge allegiance. It's now very much a direct-to-fan experiences platform. And whilst as wanky as that sounds, that's what they're selling.
Yeah.
And also, you're absolutely right that not only is it the first step to then ultimately being upstreamed and licensed, because you own everything. You're not giving away any rights that you would normally have to do in a typical deal. But now there are huge artists who are signed, who are coming back to then create fan-led experiences and special editions, which they're selling via pledge. And that's just one example. So back to the lengths of what people will do there, I think that, sort of sperm is probably the most ludicrous out there. But, I act for big drinks brands, big alcohol brands, I act for all of the handset manufacturers. What these people are looking for is a story for their marketing and how a content or an artist can feed into that story, as it were. And that's what people can monetize. But the idea of sitting there and shaking your fist at the sky about the death of the album and all that nonsense, I think we're done with that now. I would like to think so.
Is it actually the end of the era of the musician and now the rise of the creative? So that actually someone who's going to have a successful career is someone who can write great songs, come up with a great idea for a video, come up with a marketing concept that's creative and interesting, new, innovative, different. And that's actually where we are now. That's something that encompasses a whole artist.
Oh, hang on, we've got a Let's go with Rob first. Rob, do you mind just shouting?
There are plenty of creative people that are actually involved in these industries that are not musicians and are assisting those creative people. Our job as agents now has become less wait for the album to come out and then react and then sell the band accordingly. We are now being asked to go into the planning meetings with the label and come up with the plot. That's what we have to do,
Because it's not radio anymore, is it?
Sorry?
It used to be radio-led.
It used to be radio marketing, where you're going to spend your money and all that. And now it's like, what's the great idea to launch this band in London at a live show? So that, there are plenty of creative people out there. And frankly, I think the musician has to understand that bit, that first kind of journey for the year or two. And they have to understand the worth of their fans and looking after their fans, which they never did before, necessarily. And really, it's not up to them to actually solve all those other problems.
It's that thing of getting from the no people to 300 people, though. Do they need some of that in the mix in order? Because, of course, once you get to 300 people, you can start getting all the professionals around you.
The attraction of a hard-working band that comes into your office or your venue and says, "We pulled this together."
Is there a microphone floating around? I think we've got a question. Down the front.
I certainly agree with you that the first million fans are the hardest. I mean, once you've got that on, then the next level becomes a lot easier.
You ready for me? Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Laura. I'm She Makes War. I sang earlier. I've got 2 comments, if that's okay. One is that as an artist, I take great exception to the idea that all we're trying to do is take money off the fans. I think that's a really dangerous angle. I understand this is obviously to do with money and it's going to be a little bit cynical. But I don't think I'm the only musician here who went, "Whoa," when you said that. Because these 2 did, I think, right?
Anyone else?
It's kind of horrible. I think there's a nicer way of looking at it. And the second thing is I put on my own shows in London and Bristol and have done for nearly 3 years now. It is definitely possible to put on shows and make your own money back and make a little bit of money to pay the bands and yourself. It's very doom and gloom up there because I know you're talking about bigger venues with these massive overheads. But I think a lot of us here probably need to talk a little bit more specifically about how you get to that 200 to impress coder, which I'm hoping to do one day, but I'm getting there, you know. I can pull about 150, but I'm sort of getting there. That can cover your costs. You can find venues that will charge you maybe 100 quid, 150 quid. It's not the best venue in the world and you can't fit in 500 people, but if you're trying to find a venue for that much money, you don't have 500 fans, do you? So it's all right. So you can still do gigs, and Michigan puts gigs on as well. And you make money back, don't you? Yes, I do. So there's definitely ways. I just thought it was a bit depressing there, so I wanted to add something.
Nicholas, you've been nodding and
So I agree entirely. I'm about to give a talk downstairs, come and listen to it after this, which is 45 minutes of why you have to love your fans, and if you don't, it won't work. So I completely agree with your statement. And actually, a whole bunch of them will love you and never be able to give you any money. Some of them because they're evil, nasty freeloaders, and some of them because they don't have any money. And they still love what you do. And that's really important. So I agree entirely. And I think that the heart of what's changed, and this is where I was nodding to your point about the end of the musician, though I take your point, I don't think that every musician at every stage of their career has to be a polymath who is expert at every bit. But what does change is that the old world was A&R guys wandering around, and you're kind of going, pick me, and if you were lifted off in this magic place to a place where you never made royalties, except if you were really lucky, but that's what you thought was kind of the special world. Now we go, actually, that can still happen. There's still reality TV shows and so on, but there is an alternative route, and that route is around the route you're taking, which is kind of find an audience, build on it slowly, love your fans, give them an opportunity to love you back in a potentially financial way. I used to be a banker, so I think that way, but to love you back in a way that gives you money and allows you to keep creating your art. I've backed 7 different games on Kickstarter to be made. I haven't played any of them. I paid because I wanted these games to exist, not because I wanted the game myself. I backed somebody to make a series on sexism in video games because it was important we talked about it. I've only watched one of them. She's made lots of them because I was more interested in both spending the money on it and stating to the people who can see what I back on Kickstarter that I'm the kind of person who believes that this is a bad thing and we should do something about it and support people. So that's where I think those connections come. I absolutely think, not only that, the bit where I was nodding with you is that I think that musicians, the bit which I nod is that I think the introverted musician who wants to hide away, or writer, or any other creative, wants to hide away on a hill, build a perfect thing, and then drop it into the world and hopes it works, is going to find it really, really hard. I think that over time, so I write, I've self-published a bunch of books. I've published a book with Penguin. The first book I self-published, I designed the cover. That was rubbish. I had to pay somebody for that one. But I typeset it, I edited it, I did everything myself, and I made some money. I can't tell you how glad I am I don't have to do all of that anymore. There's bits I can do. Other people are either better at it, like design, or cheaper at it, like proofreading, than me. So that's where I agree with you, that there are some people who are way better than I am at bits of the professional publishing place, and I'm delighted to move to a place where they can help me. But along the way, instead of waiting for somebody to pick me, when I went into Penguin to pitch the book, when they knew they were interested, yeah, no, absolutely. Nod. When I went into Penguin, we sat there for an hour. They didn't once ask me about the book. They'd read the proposal, but their question was, how many Twitter followers do you have? How often do you talk to them? Do they talk back? The self-published stuff you've got, how did you get to make money from self-publishing? Nobody does that. And they were much more interested in me as a package that brought to them a community and a fan, and the ability to sell, because I demonstrated that. But frankly, if the book was crap, they still wouldn't have picked it, even if I had all the rest of it. That's not true. I'm going to mention Jordan in my world of books. But sometimes the book doesn't have to be good. It will sell. But that's where... So we're agreeing. Is that what's happening? We're now agreeing.
I'm agreeing on the level between 5 and 400 or 500 or whatever. Yes, the artist has to be absolutely engaged in those very aspects. They need to understand what's going on at the door, what's going on at the bar, what makes them attractive to a venue or an audience and that. But at some point, you get upstreamed to use.
Which is great.
Laura's made a great point actually as well, which is, I think, would resonate with a lot of independent and musicians who are, like Laura, doing things very much themselves. We've got another question as well. Can we get the mic there? And I'll just
can I respond to that? Because
yeah, go for it.
It was obviously aimed at me, so I'll probably best responding to it. You've got to understand, I was a musician for 10 years, Laura. I walked out of music college, I walked straight into the back of a transit van and went off on tour for 10 years. I lived on net, and it was great, and I saw the world and I loved it. But there comes a point where you have to make a living because things happen in life.
I think there's a nicer way of doing it than saying, I'm going to take
that's just trade. That's just.
But I
know it might sound like that but that's we live in a world of commerce, and so we buy and sell
but
things.
Maybe it is a trade-off, isn't it? I think what you're saying is it's not just about taking the money off; it's about giving the fan the experience and having a lovely. You're someone who has a very good relationship with your fans, so yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, but to that point, I mean.
Sorry, no. Go on, Cliff. Go on.
My turn.
Yes, go on.
But I'm not sure that the narrative is particularly helpful either way, because actually I think that what we were trying to say, it's about monetizing behavior in more diverse ways. And that, as I said, there are people who think charging a tenner for a CD is cynical and that you are eking money out of them. You've poured your heart and soul into a piece of, creative work which is completely unique, and somebody else says, oh, because it's on a shiny disc that cost £1 to make, you've got a £9 margin here. That's a rip-off. There's endless places on that debate, and I just think it's entirely unhelpful. If someone's prepared to pay £10,000 for a voicemail from you, that's not cynical, that's not getting money out of them. But I think the point you were making is that you have to be thinking about it in more creative ways than we've had to do that in the past. And if you can do it in a way that actually makes people think that they're actually getting a bit of a bargain, that's even better.
Can I just get our next question quickly? Oh, sorry. Hello. Yes.
Hi, how's it going? My name is Donald Scannell. I work with a company called Gigstarter, and I just want to share our business model with you and see what you think of it. So we're a promotions company. We work with big established artists like David Gray, but we also write software that allows small artists to promote their own gigs. And what's really different about our model is what we charge. We charge less than half of what a promoter normally charges, and our software does everything from marketing to ticketing all in one. So for us, the artist makes 30% more. So we're taking the DIY ethos of brand new bands, but we're also helping established artists make about a third more per gig. And we just kind of looked at the live music industry from our own experience and wiped the slate clean and went, we've artists on one side, we've fans on the other. How do we bring them together with as little cost being drained in the process at the time? And we were literally going through supply charts and models of the flow and going, we're going to attack the promoter cut or we're going to attack the ticketing cut. And we've been able to take 30% less than artists normally pay out of their ticket. So I just want to get your feedback on that.
Can we just get, we're running rapidly out of time, and I know we've got another question to get to. So Gavin, do you want to take that? Or, yeah.
That was a sign.
Or do you guys want to have a chat after the panel?
I mean, the reality is, I've seen any number of those kind of apps coming up. Topspin's probably the market leader that's direct to fan and manages that process. How you monetize it, I mean, God knows. I just don't know. A band app is another one. I just don't know how they monetize it, if I'm honest. Other than to get the kickback on the tickets. I mean, it's all about tickets. And as you know, the market leader probably with penetration in terms of downloads is Songkick. And even they have their issues with, because I know what the kickback is on the tickets and the value of that, because the reality is that a kickback on a booking fee is net the VAT and the cost, so it's a tiny amount of money. So again, it's all about volume. How do you do volume of tickets? And that's a toughie, unless you go about setting up a ticketing company yourself, or you set up a distribution company or something whereby you go and get the license direct from the artist. But you're back into the old models one way or another.
Well,
Can I add on that basically, to me, that is the tax, that is the thing that actually has to be removed somehow if live industry is going to stay where it is. Effectively, there are booking agents taking 10 to 15% of the money that actually a fan pays for a ticket. So yes, Songkick's come along and they've improved on what Music Glue were offering. And there's going to be a new player in the room soon called Dice. And Dice, I think, has got similar software to Uber. And it's basically looking at the model of actually how do you sell tickets without taking any fee on top of it? Yeah. Yeah, bring it on, because the people taking that money are not investing it at all in this business.
Guys, I have to stop it there. I'm so sorry. We're out of time. So
yes, just a quick question, or it's a comment and a question. So my name is Fred. I'm like a piano man, I'm a songwriter kind of person. And people are talking about U2 and they're giving their album away. The way I see it, that U2 aren't giving their album away. Apple have purchased that album for an undisclosed figure off U2. Apple are giving the album away for free as part of a marketing campaign. That's the way I see it. They're in a great position because U2 have brand pull, so it's great for Apple. They can combine. The question I've got is, how do people that don't have that kind of brand pull make money off it? It's a B2B relationship, that is. That's a business making money off another business through their marketing. So how do you, as a person that's not got the thousands of people kind of behind you, connect with businesses, make money off the businesses who are making their money by using you for their marketing, if you get what I mean?
So my first answer is I don't agree with you that Apple gave away U2's album. Apple imposed U2's album on a lot of people. And I think that's... I think that's genuinely important, because I think we're moving away from the world where people will value content. I've got 45 minutes answering why, if you want to come downstairs in a minute. I'm not going to answer it now. But what they do is they see content as part of their identity, their sense of who they are. And all of a sudden, my sense of who they are is a U2 album owner, which I spent my entire life actively not being. And now literally I can't change that anymore. It can't be done. It is now on my shelf. I have a Hearsay album at home. I'm kind of embarrassed about that, but at least I own that responsibility, which isn't true for this one. So the first thing is that I think they broke the relationship with fans, which this lady over there was talking about, because they didn't say, my fans can have this thing, isn't it awesome? They said, everybody in the world has to have it, dad rock style, and I think that's a big problem. And I think that broke a lot of challenges. Your next problem, your question, and I think Lewis probably might have a better answer than me, about how can you get a B2B relationship like that? Be bigger. I mean, I think you just have to be big enough that they go, this is an important part of my narrative. Where that level is might be changing as we get into more and more niches, and the smaller niches become more viable, but being bigger. I'm slightly inclined to let Lewis answer the rest of that question.
Yeah. But the point about it is that actually it's more about engagement. I would argue, I'd also have an issue with your question about it's all about scale. I don't think it is. I think it's about the level of connection. So I've got brands who work in the YouTube space with extreme sports. They want to find people that have got fan bases, and they can be tiny. If they're the right 500 people, that they can then work with them on a burn thing, which is to do with BMX, as it were, they will buy that album and they will do a massive sync deal for them. So what they're doing is actually finding people with the strongest connection, not the biggest scale, for the right niche. No. But my point is that for the people in the audience here, I don't want them to hear that unless you've got scale, that you can't monetize connection.
Yeah, that's a different thing, though. That's utilising basically kind of non-linear maths, knowing that it can explode up and become something massive. And if you're good at looking at it, you know which is going to